The Magic Lighthouse Keeper. Chapter 1. The Lonely Keeper. In the sleepy town of Portville, there stood a lighthouse on a cliff overlooking the vast ocean. The lighthouse had been there for over a century, and it had been tended to by a line of keepers who lived in a small cottage beside it. The current keeper, an old man named Henry, had been there for many years. He was a kind and gentle man, but he was also very lonely. Henry's daily routine was to maintain the lighthouse and its light, which he did with great care and dedication. But apart from that, he had nothing to do. He had no family or friends, and the only company he had was the sound of the waves crashing against the cliff. Sometimes, he would talk to the seagulls that perched on the windowsills, but they never replied. Henry often felt a sense of melancholy when he saw families on the beach or couples walking hand in hand. He longed for human companionship but had given up on finding it. He had grown accustomed to his solitude and had convinced himself that it was for the best. But deep down, he still yearned for someone to share his life with. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Light. One stormy night, Henry was awakened by a strange sound. He got up to investigate and saw that the light in the lighthouse had gone out. He quickly climbed the stairs to the top and found that the light had been tampered with. But he couldn't understand how it had happened. The light was only accessible from inside the lighthouse, and the door was locked. He felt a sense of unease and decided to keep watch that night. As Henry sat in the small room at the top of the lighthouse, he noticed something odd. There was a faint light that seemed to be coming from the ocean. At first, he thought it was a passing ship, but as he focused on it, he realized it was something else entirely. The light seemed to be moving towards the lighthouse, and it was getting brighter by the minute. Henry's heart raced as he watched the light approach. He wondered what it could be and why it was coming towards the lighthouse. Suddenly, the light vanished, and Henry was left in complete darkness. He tried to rationalize what he had just seen, but he couldn't explain it. He felt a sense of foreboding and decided to investigate further the next day. Chapter 3. The Stranger on the Shore. The next morning, Henry woke up early and walked down to the beach to see if he could find any clues about the mysterious light. As he walked along the shore, he noticed something unusual. There was a small boat washed up on the sand, and there was someone lying beside it. Henry approached the figure cautiously and realized it was a young woman. She looked exhausted and was shivering from the cold. Henry quickly brought her to his cottage and tended to her injuries. As she slowly regained consciousness, he introduced himself and asked her what had happened. The woman, whose name was Emily, told him that she had been on a sailing trip with her friends when their boat had been caught in a storm. The boat had capsized, and Emily had managed to cling onto a piece of driftwood until she was washed ashore. Henry felt sorry for the young woman and offered to help her in any way he could. Emily was grateful and thanked him for his kindness. As they sat and talked, Henry felt a sense of warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time. Emily was a good listener, and Henry found himself opening up to her about his life at the lighthouse. As the day went on, Emily's friends arrived, and they were reunited with her. They thanked Henry for his hospitality and invited him to join them for dinner. Henry hesitated at first but eventually agreed. He felt a sense of joy and excitement that he hadn't experienced in years. Chapter 4. The Dinner Party. That evening, Henry got dressed in his best clothes and made his way to the restaurant where Emily and her friends had arranged to meet. As he entered the restaurant, he felt a pang of nervousness. It had been so long since he had been in a social setting, and he didn't know if he would fit in. But his fears were unfounded. Emily and her friends welcomed him with open arms, and he soon found himself chatting and laughing with them. They were a lively bunch, and Henry felt like he had been transported to a different world. During dinner, Emily's friends asked Henry about his life at the lighthouse. They were fascinated by his stories, and Henry found himself enjoying the attention. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose. As the night wore on, Henry realized that he had forgotten all about the mysterious light and the strange events of the previous night. He felt happy and content, surrounded by new friends who had brought some much-needed joy into his life. As the dinner party came to an end, Emily thanked Henry for joining them and hugged him warmly. He felt a sense of warmth and gratitude that he hadn't experienced in years. As he made his way back to the lighthouse, he knew that something had changed inside him, and he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Chapter 5, A New Friendship. Over the next few weeks, Henry and Emily became good friends. She would often visit him at the lighthouse, and they would sit and talk for hours on end. Henry felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in years, and he cherished their conversations. Emily was an adventurous and curious person, and she loved exploring new places. One day, she suggested that they go on a hike along the cliffside. Henry was hesitant at first, but Emily's enthusiasm was contagious, and he agreed to join her. As they walked along the path, Emily pointed out the different types of flora and fauna they encountered. She was knowledgeable and passionate about nature, and Henry found himself learning new things from her. They reached a spot where they had a stunning view of the ocean, and Emily pulled out a picnic basket from her backpack. They sat down and enjoyed a meal together, watching the waves crash against the cliffs. As the day wore on, Henry realized that he was starting to look at life in a different way. He was no longer content with his solitary existence, and he wanted to explore the world and meet new people. Emily had opened his eyes to the beauty of life, and he was grateful for her friendship. As they made their way back to the lighthouse, Henry felt a sense of accomplishment. He had done something he had never thought he would, and he had enjoyed it. He knew that he had a lot to thank Emily for, and he looked forward to their next adventure together. Chapter 6, The Return of the Mysterious Light. As Henry and Emily's friendship grew stronger, Henry found himself thinking less and less about the mysterious light that he had seen. He was enjoying life and had started to see the world in a different light. But one night, as he was sitting in his armchair, he noticed the light once again. It was as bright as ever, and Henry couldn't believe it. He tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The light was too bright and too mesmerizing. Henry couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the light and what it could mean. Was it a sign of something? Was it a warning of some kind? He knew he had to investigate further. The next morning, he decided to take a walk along the beach and see if he could find any clues. He walked for hours, scanning the horizon for any signs of the light. But he found nothing. As the sun started to set, Henry made his way back to the lighthouse. He was tired and frustrated. He couldn't understand why the light had come back and what it meant. He knew he had to tell Emily about it and get her opinion. When he reached the lighthouse, he found Emily waiting for him. She could tell that something was wrong and asked him what was bothering him. Henry told her about the light and how it had returned. Emily listened carefully and suggested that they investigate further. Together, they came up with a plan to find out more about the mysterious light. They would keep watch for it and document its movements. They would also try to find out if anyone else had seen it and what they thought it meant. As they sat down to plan their next move, Henry felt a sense of relief. He wasn't alone anymore, and he knew that he had a friend who would stand by him no matter what. Together, they would solve the mystery of the light and uncover its secrets. Chapter 7, The Discovery. For the next few nights, Henry and Emily kept watch for the mysterious light. They stayed up late, scanning the horizon with binoculars and taking notes on its movements. They also asked around to see if anyone else had seen the light, but no one had any answers. Then, on the fifth night, something strange happened. As they were watching the light, they noticed that it was moving in a pattern. It would appear for a few seconds, disappear, and then reappear in a different spot. It was almost as if it was signaling to them. Emily suggested that they follow the pattern and see where it led. Henry agreed, and they set out early the next morning to follow the light's path. They walked for hours along the coastline, following the light's pattern. As they walked, Henry noticed that the terrain was becoming more rugged and treacherous. They had to be careful not to slip on the rocks or get caught in the strong currents. Finally, after a long and arduous journey, they reached a hidden cove. There, in the center of the cove, was a small island. And on the island, they saw the source of the mysterious light. It was a lighthouse. Henry and Emily couldn't believe their eyes. They had discovered another lighthouse, one that they had never known existed. They felt a sense of excitement and curiosity as they approached the lighthouse. As they climbed up the stairs, they noticed that the lighthouse was abandoned. There were cobwebs and dust everywhere, and the place looked like it hadn't been used in years. But then they noticed something strange. There was a diary lying on the floor, and it looked like it had been left behind by the last person who had used the lighthouse. Henry picked it up and started to read. The diary belonged to a lighthouse keeper who had been stationed at the abandoned lighthouse. He had been the last person to use it before it was decommissioned, and his entries spoke of a mysterious light that he had seen in the sky. He had tried to investigate it, but he had never been able to uncover its secrets. As Henry and Emily read the diary, they realized that they had uncovered something important. They had solved the mystery of the light, and they had discovered a forgotten part of history. They felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that they had been the ones to uncover the truth. As they made their way back to the lighthouse, Henry and Emily knew that they would always cherish this adventure. They had discovered a new friendship, and they had uncovered a mystery that had been hidden for years. They knew that they would always have each other's backs, and they looked forward to many more adventures together. Chapter 8: The End of an Adventure. Henry and Emily returned to the lighthouse, exhausted but exhilarated. They had solved the mystery of the light, uncovered a forgotten part of history, and formed a bond that would last a lifetime. As they sat down to talk, they realized that their adventure was coming to an end. Henry had to return to his home in the city, and Emily had to continue her work at the lighthouse. They knew that they would miss each other, but they also knew that their friendship would endure. Henry thanked Emily for everything she had done for him. He told her that he had never felt so alive and so connected to another person. Emily hugged him and said that she felt the same way. As they said the goodbyes, Henry and Emily promised to stay in touch and to meet up again soon. They knew that they had formed a bond that was unbreakable, and they would always be there for each other. As Henry made his way back to the city, he couldn't help but feel grateful for the adventure he had just experienced. He had learned so much about himself and about the world around him. He had discovered the beauty of nature, the power of friendship, and the importance of following your passions. When he arrived home, Henry sat down at his desk and started to write. He wrote about his adventure, about the mystery of the light, and about the friend he had made along the way. He knew that this story would be one that he would cherish forever, and one that he would share with others for years to come. Answer: the adventure of Henry and Emily came to an end. But their friendship and the memories they had created would last a lifetime. They had discovered a part of history that had been forgotten, and they had discovered something even more important: the power of friendship and the magic of adventure.